Good evening. It's 7:01 p.m. on August 12th, 2024. This is the continued hearing of the Milton Board of Appeals regarding the application of Milton Hospital for certain relief at 199 Reedsdale Road. Since this is the fourth or fifth hearing, if you include the site visit, I will dispense with a full reading of the public notice because the attendees and participants are well aware of that. So the purpose of tonight's hearing and the way that I plan to conduct the hearing is as follows. At this point, what we're going to do is we're going to open up the hearing for the final submission of evidence. And by evidence, we mean materials that have been provided to the board over the past couple of days by way of additional peer reviews, as well as by way of additional memoranda submitted by counsel for the applicant. And I'm going to ask the counsel for the applicant to summarize those materials and those submissions for the board at the appropriate time. Once that is done, we will open it up for questions. If there are questions from members of the public or other issues that need to be taken care of. At that point, I will move to close the evidentiary portion of the hearing. At that point, public comment, public input will come to an end, and the board will begin its deliberations relative to this application and move potentially toward a vote. During the course of the board's deliberations, the board at its discretion may seek information or ask questions of the applicant or from other members of the public, consultants, etc. And this is at the discretion of the board. We will not be reopening the public hearing for additional evidence absent exigent circumstances, which I don't anticipate will take place. So I want to make sure that everyone is clear on what the process is and what we will be doing here tonight. So with that, I'm going to ask Attorney Marion McKettrick if she would summarize the additional evidentiary material that has recently been provided to the board, and perhaps also kind of, I'll also as a courtesy, give the applicant a minute or two to kind of tie a nice little bow on this and wrap up. If she so desires. So, Attorney McKettrick.
Thank you very much. I am Marion McKettrick, and I represent the applicant. And with us tonight are some members of the applicant's consulting team. Justin Mosca, his project manager, is here. Sean Manning, who's the transportation planning and operations person. Both of them work for VHB. And then we have, I don't know if Sean Green's here, but we have Richard Fernandez, who's the president of the hospital, Janine Kovitz, director of facilities planning. And we also have one of the peer reviewers, Rebecca Brown from GPI. She did the peer review for the traffic. And I hope I didn't miss anybody, but so we're all here tonight to answer questions. But first, I will do, the chair has just asked, and provide a summary about what we're going to do tonight. And that was a good summary of why we're here. The hearing was continued from last week to receive final closing comments from two peer reviewers, Rebecca Brown of GPI on traffic and Steve Stanish of Horsley Witten Group on stormwater and engineering, and also what we call a closing letter from Marina Fernandez. So the purpose of this is to bring to a close and conclusion the exchange of information after a peer reviewer initially reviews all of the material relating to their task that they've been asked to carry out. And that is to review all the material supplied by the applicant for completeness, accuracy, for usual standards that are applied to that type of work. And then in some cases, during that process, and that did happen here, the applicant is asked to provide more detailed information, is asked to show where they received, where certain data is located, what table it's in, and then the documents submitted to this board, the traffic management report and the engineering and stormwater report and the site plan have all been updated based on the comments and the final comments received from these peer reviewers. Since we didn't receive the final comment letters until Tuesday, there are some comments that will require updating the site plan. And those, if the board wants to close the hearing tonight, I recommend that the board include those as conditions in any decision. The condition would be to say that the applicant has to update the existing so-called final site plan to add the information was requested by the peer reviewers. I also provided a couple of other things for this hearing. Been waiting for a while. You needed a certified plan for the evergreen planting plan along part of the Spafford Road lot line, and you have that now. I've sent that to you. And also, I did take that question last week to the building commissioner about the driveway going into the employee parking area. And the building commissioner sent an email back, which I forwarded to the board, which said he agreed with the board's discussion last week that there's no need to upgrade that driveway. So that's the reason we're here. I think what I'd like to do now is sort of run through basically what I'd like to do. What we get out of these peer reviews really are conditions of approval. There are specific requirements that the peer reviewer feels that the applicant should fulfill. If the peer reviewer said you have to update the site plan and add certain information, that's all been done. The only updating that hasn't been done is updating that was newly requested in the final letters on Tuesday. And that updating will have to be done as a condition of the permit if you close the hearing tonight. So I'm going to, the board did ask me to provide a memo about conditions of approval. And I'm going to use that as my framework because that kind of explains just exactly what the conclusions were from the peer reviews. Putting this all into context, I guess I'd like to say something at the end about that. But what I'd say right now is, this is an application for an addition, 8,118 square foot addition to the emergency room at Milton Hospital, or BID Milton as it's known now. And that is to accommodate existing patient load, which has doubled approximately since 2005. In addition to that, the hospital needed to create more parking on site. It was using satellite parking for 60 employees. That was only a temporary arrangement, and the Board of Appeals, which permitted that, required that the board create more parking on site. So those are the two major elements of this application. The parking area, the large new parking area that's being created, is next to the emergency room below the existing parking. It's on a grade, a hillside. And so it requires the importation of approximately 21 cubic yards of fill. And that requires a special permit from the Board of Appeals. So one of the things the board has to do is issue that special permit. That permit requires a number of engineering details be provided on the plan. And all of those details have been reviewed in the course of this peer review process. The addition to the emergency room requires a special permit. The couple of changes requested in the employee temporary lot facing Highland Street, one to make it permanent, the other one to put pervious pavement on the surface of that lot. Those are modifications of an earlier special permit, require an amendment to the special permit. And the parking lot, the new parking lot, requires a determination by the board that the parking for the use proposed is adequate, and provisions to show that it will be managed in the future if it turns out that more parking is needed. That's the simplest way to explain the requirements for that part of the zoning bylaw. So the Milton Hospital undertook a rather thorough traffic and parking and circulation study. And then the town hired a peer reviewer to review that study. And coming out of that study, there were a lot of recommendations. And some of them pertain to studies that they are asking the hospital, or recommending that the town require the hospital do after occupancy, in order to make sure that parking on site continues to be sufficient, in order to review the intersection at Reedsdale Road, which the hospital is directing more traffic towards, to make sure it's being managed efficiently. And then, in fact, even to look at traffic at the three intersections that surround the hospital. That's Thatcher, Highland, Canton, Reedsdale, and Reedsdale, Randolph Ave. So this I haven't really seen this before, but the reason for the to put those requirements before for the town to impose those requirements is to help the town manage the traffic situation in this area. Hospital's only one contributor, but this is something the hospital can do to help the town make future plans that will provide data that will help the town with its planning. So now, just turning to the actual what was determined both by the town engineer and by the peer reviewers. I'm going to do this by type of relief request, just because I find that an easier way to organize the required conditions and the changes and the upgrades and things that were requested by the peer reviewers. So on the special permit to allow construction of the addition, the hospital already agreed to provide additional evergreen plantings next to Spafford Road. That's not directly related to this application, but it was mitigation that was requested by some Spafford Road residents, and the hospital has agreed to do that. The town's asked for a new sanitary sewer line to be 8 inches rather than 6 inches. There are some new calculations that have been required relating to the existing sewer load and what the existing service will require. Those will have to be provided for the town before they can get a sewer and utility and connection permit. So these are technical changes that the town and the peer reviewer requested. Some construction details showing a 3-foot separation between domestic water and fire service. And then general requirements such as the water work has to be in accordance with town of Milton regulations. There has to be a flat fire flow test 12 months before construction begins, so pretty soon. Existing on-site water main valves have to be tested. If they're not working, they have to be replaced. And then there was some test pit information that the applicant has not done yet, but will do. And that's going to have to be a condition if a permit is granted. And then it will be shown on the existing conditions, an updated existing conditions plan on the site plan. So those are special conditions that relate to the addition. On the temporary daytime parking lot, it's a relatively straightforward request. The applicant wants to put in pervious pavement, which absorbs water better than the current surface, which is a hard packed dirt. Well, that was a requirement in the initial permit that it be hard packed dirt. There was no objection to any of that from peer reviewers. But the town did look at drainage going down in that direction, up above that lot, and is requiring that some work be done up above that temporary lot facing Highland Street. So the reason for that is that there's a lot of erosion from stormwater flowing downhill from that corner of this site down into the parking lot at the police station. And the town just did some work to correct that erosion and wants to hopefully make sure that it's not going to come back or worsen. So those changes were something called an outlet and plunge pool up above the parking lot, riprap, and then an invert. And there are some technical requirements that certain measurements that have not yet been provided for those improvements be added to the site plan. I will mention that Depreet Engineering has done a lot of the engineering design. They work with VHB. On Tuesday, VHB project engineer Justin Mosca contacted Depreet Engineering to ask them if they would be able to make any changes that were newly added to that final letter from the engineering reviewer. Depreet responded, yes, they would make all of these changes. So we have agreed to them, but some of them have to be added to the site. The next, on the permit to allow importation of clean fill, there were no specific peer review comments requiring changes in the materials submitted. There are a number of things that the town's zoning permit for fill requires be on the plan, and they are on the plan. So those details are just already included and they're there. On the adequacy of parking, there are some engineering requirements that were added relating to stormwater primarily. I mentioned the test pit information already. The town has some test pits they're actual test pits that they have to do to test the quality of the ground that they're going to be, constructing on to create this parking lot. Those test pits have to be completed. That actual work has to be done, and then those results have to be put as an update to the current site plan. There are some pipe sizing calculations that have to be evaluated to confirm that the pipes will be big enough to handle the stormwater flow. There's something called a stormwater pollution prevention plan. I think this goes to the feds. I don't know, it's the state or the federal government. It doesn't go to the town to be approved, but a copy is required now to be submitted to the town prior to construction. And then the traffic reviewer asked that the hospital prepare a certified site plan showing what the sight lines are at the Highland Street entrance, and based on that site plan, to remove any obstructions so that the sight lines at that entrance will meet certain requirements. There's an AASHTO minimum sight distance in both directions, and something else called the intersection sight distance, ISD. These are standards that are generally recognized, and the hospital will have to do some work to remove bushes, might have to remove a portion of a fence. There might be something else obstructing the view. They will have to remove whatever prevents that intersection right now from meeting the minimum standards. Finally, the traffic peer reviewer asked the hospital to add more signs. The hospital is changing the direction of traffic inside the site. And so there's a list of signs, do not enter at the northerly end of the one-way drive, left turn only. On the southbound approach to the ambulance stalls, right turn only. On the westbound approach to the ambulance stalls, and stop signs at the northerly end of the one-way driveway near the ambulance bays. Those are all required to be done and also to be added to the site plan. Then we get to a list of studies. These are, significant requirements, but things that the hospital has agreed to do. The first one is that the hospital did a study looking at the amount of traffic on Spafford Road at a certain high traffic time, and evaluated how many of those trips were hospital related and how many weren't. And that's in the application materials that you've received, and the neighbors have seen that. It establishes about a 20% level of hospital traffic. But Spafford Road itself and the other ladder streets, as we've heard not only in this application, but for other applications for other new projects in this area, there's very heavy traffic on those ladder streets, and they're all looking for some forms of mitigation to help with that. So what the hospital has agreed to do is to conduct two studies. A baseline study, which could be done, now or fairly soon, to assess pre-construction cut-through traffic volumes on Spafford, Buckingham, Martin, and Clifton Road. That's supposed to be conducted over 3 weekdays from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Town can ask for peer review of that if they want. And then the second requirement is that they conduct such a study post occupancy. Again, to see if how the level of traffic may have changed on those streets in the interim. Some other studies required at different times prior to issuance of an occupancy permit, so after construction, but before they get their occupancy permit, they're supposed to conduct a road safety audit at Reedsdale Road and Canton Ave, Reedsdale Road and Randolph Ave. These results will go to the town. Again, prior to issuance of an occupancy permit, applicant shall review available vehicular and pedestrian clearance intervals and develop an optimal signal timing plan for the town for intersections at Reedsdale Road and Canton, Canton Ave, Thatcher Street, and Highland Street. That timing plan is to be given to the town engineer, for the town to use to implement changed intervals at those streetlights, should they choose to do so. The only comment I had about that was the peer reviewer said that the hospital had to implement the new timing. They can't do that because they don't have any authority to change signals, but the town would use the information to do that. And then within 1 year and not sooner than 6 months following occupancy, the hospital has to study its parking again. And that is to make sure, because the parking occupancy is during peak times right now, because based on the study that the hospital just did, can be as close to 95%. That's only at peak time. And the peer reviewer said, well, what if, some of those are designated spaces, therefore, handicapped or for some other purpose, maybe it's actually, too full at those times. So we want you to do a post-occupancy study and look at whether you need to do more modifications of your parking design, implement off-site parking again. If it looks like you're, again, too crowded, expand your available supply, implement other measures to reduce employee trips to the site. And then following implementation, the peer reviewer condition requested was that the hospital study this again. And essentially, the way the condition is worded by the peer reviewer, the studies go on until finally you reach no more than 95% occupancy during peak times. That's a very long-running condition. I've never really seen one like that. That's for the board to consider, but that's what she's recommending. And then finally, at the Reedsdale Road intersection, the peer reviewer recommended that the hospital do a post-occupancy traffic study to look at volume to capacity ratios, how much cars are queuing up into the driveway at the hospital. And there are certain standards that were recommended that it should not exceed. So 350 feet or 14 vehicles. And, the 95th percentile queue on Reedsdale Road, northbound left line should be 75 feet and so forth. The study should be looking at these standards and seeing whether they're being exceeded. Then, if there's no light at Reedsdale at that intersection, and it is quite possible that no light can be put in because it's pretty close to the Canton Ave Route 28 intersection, and not all that far away from the Reedsdale Road Route 28 intersection. So, what the peer reviewer wants the hospital to do is to conduct a study and see what remedial measures they could introduce to improve traffic congestion at that intersection. If it turns out with the new layout in the hospital, the new turning plans, the one way that's been proposed, if it turns out then that there is an increasing problem with traffic at that intersection, then the hospital needs to work on a plan for improving that. And, as far as the traffic light goes, none of us know. Our traffic engineer has said it, it's probably been looked at before, but the peer reviewer is simply asking that they look at that and look at whether there are other measures that they could introduce, not a traffic light, but other things that they could do, maybe have a new turning lane or something like that. Anything that's going to happen in the street requires approval by the town of Milton. And so it would be a process of working with the town on any changes like that. And finally, the peer reviewer recommended that the town reserve the right to hire a third-party peer review of any of these post-occupancy studies. So that's a review of the kinds of conditions and new information that were requested as a result of the peer review of all the information that the hospital has submitted. The town engineer, Marina Fernandez, has reviewed all of this. She's reviewed the peer reviews, the answers. She's provided her own comments and requests. I spoke to her today. She was going to look again at the conditions. I sent her a copy of the list of conditions that I provided to this board. I don't know if she's able to be here tonight. She thought she might, but she did say that she would try to be in touch with me if she saw anything that was missing. The board can also reserve the right to just get input from her after this meeting on the specific conditions that they might choose to put into a decision. So that's a summary. I didn't go through, some of the peer reviews are very long, very detailed. There's a lot of technical information in there, but the bottom line and what's important for everyone to understand is that the hospital has received all this feedback and has made every change that has been requested. They really haven't pushed back on any of this, even the additional studies. It's pretty obvious that that information is really helpful to the town, and it's just something that they can, the town and the hospital can work together on, and hopefully can work with other new projects that are proposed for this area also. So that's my summary. I hope that's more or less what you were hoping I could provide. I just want to say, kind of as a concluding comment, I guess, while we're still in the public hearing, that this is a plan that addresses an obvious need. The hospital clearly needs more private examination space in its emergency room. These are not hospital admission rooms. So the theory is, anyway, that this extra space is going to accommodate their current load. What has happened, as we all know, in the interim, is that at the end of August, Kearney Hospital closed. That means that there could be increased traffic coming to the hospital. There could be, more impact than was anticipated. And for that reason, if for no other, these follow-up studies will help to determine whether there's still other measures that need to be implemented, whether they need still more parking on their site. Again, whether they have to go back to satellite parking, so on and so forth. So the parking area itself is proposed basically to meet existing needs, and it's proposed to accommodate the 60 parking spaces that are now being provided in a satellite parking lot. And although the Board of Appeals approved that, they approved it conditionally on the hospital coming back with a plan to expand on-site parking, which is what they've done here. And finally, the follow-up studies on the ladder streets, they're not directly related to this application. It's not that the hospital is creating all that traffic on the ladder streets, but it is obvious to everyone who's been studying this for the hospital that there's a problem on those streets. There's still really too much traffic, or at least a very difficult amount of traffic, and it does include trucks. It's very hard for the residents, and the streets are not very wide. So I think it's good, a wonderful thing if the hospital can work with the town to provide some basic data just to show what the load of traffic is and the composition, perhaps. That will allow the town to come up with some mitigation measures. There have been meetings about this. The Traffic Commission has talked about it, but nothing has come out of that so far. I think it's very frustrating, and so it would be great if some progress could be made because of these studies. So that's my summary. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Appreciate that. Let me ask my fellow board members, Ms. O'Donnell and Mr. Brown. Ms. O'Donnell, any questions or comments? Kathleen?
Well, I wanted to thank Marion very much for her memos. This really, because I'd gone through those peer review reports, most of them, and I'm like, oh my gosh, my hair was going to fall out. There was just actually one question I had on one of these conditions, which seemed kind of odd to me, and it was about a fire flow test at least 12 months prior to construction. Aren't you planning on doing construction sooner than 12 months?
I think it's within 12 months. Maybe I did a typo there.
No,
in other words, it can't be more than 12 months before construction.
It says at least 12 months.
Yeah, that's wrong.
Okay.
And it probably, if it was in the peer review, it's.
That's the way it was in the peer review report.
Yeah, I think it's a typo.
We verified with
would not-
Marina that that's a typo.
Does
Okay.
everybody agree with that? Yeah.
Yeah, can
'cause
you
I
guys hear
thought-
me?
I didn't think you were hanging around for a year waiting for this, so.
So, Justin, hold on one second. We can hear you. Justin, do you wish to be recognized to speak?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't think you could hear me. I was just trying to speak in earlier. Yeah, Justin Moscow with VHP. It's correct. That was a typo. That's all I was trying to say earlier.
Okay.
And that's been corrected. It's a fire protection regulation
Yeah.
that you just do it within 12 months of construction.
Right,
So,
but
That's
yeah,
been clarified.
okay, thank you. That's the only question I had.
Thank you. Michael, any questions or comments?
No, I also thank you, Marion, for that explanation and for these memos. These are super helpful. And I read through them. I don't have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Counselor, does any other member of your team or the applicant wish to say anything additionally?
Anybody else? I guess not.
She
Thank
said it well.
Okay, well, at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up to members of the public for the limited purpose of making comments or asking questions relative to the materials that have been presented this evening. And in keeping with our practice, if you wish to speak, please indicate by using the raise hand function on this. You'll be recognized. We'll ask you to identify yourself as a courtesy you put on your camera. But at this point, do any members of the public who are attending the meeting care to ask a question or make a comment? Okay, seeing none, I think at this point in time, I'm going to move to close the evidentiary portion of the hearing. I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to dispense with asking for a specific motion to do that because, as I mentioned, that was the plan. I don't anticipate, I don't see any objections to moving that. So at this point, I'm going to declare the evidentiary portion of this public hearing to be closed. And in keeping with the requirements of the open meeting law, as well as the rules and custom of the Board of Appeals, the board will now begin to move in the direction of engaging in a deliberation, which would potentially include the possibility of a vote. Before we do that, I'm going to exercise my prerogative as chair to briefly thank the applicant. The board benefited greatly during the course of this process by having access to experienced counsel for the applicant, and that the board was greatly aided in how this hearing was conducted, as well as in the review of the application by the materials provided by the applicant's counsel, as well as by her expertise. So we thank Attorney McKettrick for her efforts on behalf of the applicant. We also thank the various consultants, peer reviewers, etc., for the many hours of work that certainly was indicated in the high level of quality of the submissions provided to the board, if not by the length of the submissions provided to the board in some cases. So we very much appreciate the input of the experts associated with this. I also want to express on behalf of the board our thanks for the members of the public from the Spafford Road area and from others for their participation in this. process. The board also benefited greatly from their input, their specific knowledge associated with conditions in their neighborhood, as well as the obvious time and energy that they spent in taking time away from their busy lives as well as to participate in this process. I would also, on a personal note, also extend the board's appreciation for the management at Milton Hospital, for the leadership of Milton Hospital, for their presence during the course of the hearing, as well as for their efforts in this regard, particularly in regards to the efforts that have been obviously very important to the board in terms of communicating and engaging with the neighbors. It's refreshing, and certainly it is something that I hope that the board, let me rephrase that, it's something that I hope that the hospital's leadership, et cetera, will continue to engage in as this goes forward. That's the end of my comments, thanking folks for their participation in this. So at this point, I think I'd like to open it up to a discussion regarding this. And again, I think I'll exercise the prerogative of the chair, and I will begin. From my point of view, I think that this application has merit. The hospital is an important community asset in the town of Milton that provides a unique and important service to the community. The hospital is also an institution which is located within a community, indeed located within a neighborhood. And in the past, there have been situations where the hospital and the neighborhood have been at odds. I think it is commendable on the part of the hospital at this particular point in time that they have gone the extra mile, if you will, in terms of attempting to engage with the neighbors, as I mentioned, meet with the neighbors, and to address their concerns. What I heard during the course of this hearing were concerns relative to the issue of traffic. And traffic is indeed an issue on that. It is my hope, by the proactive measures agreed to by the hospital, both in terms of changing the geometry of travel on the locus, as well as the hospital agreeing to partake in the recommended studies and other long-term measures, that some progress can be made toward addressing the traffic issues on Spafford Road and the other latter streets. I will borrow a phrase from Attorney McKettrick. I think it is beyond frustrating that despite the concerns of the neighbors on that road, that it appears that little has been done on the part of the town to assuage those concerns. So to the extent that this board can act in some way by exercising its authority on this particular application to reduce, possibly, or at the very least, give credence and try to address some of those issues, I think is an important thing coming out of this. So at the end of the day, I feel that the requirements for special permit and the other relief sought by the applicant have been met. At this point, I think I'm going to conclude my comments and simply because Kathleen O'Donnell is the first person on my screen in my Hollywood squares here, I'm going to open the microphone off to Kathleen O'Donnell for her comments. Kathleen.
I agree with our chair that it seems as if the real issues here have been raised by the abutters have been the traffic, which is really not something that the hospital has the ability to address. And I appreciate the fact that the hospital has done what it can to address the situation, physical situation, to the extent that it can. And I'm sensitive. Obviously, I live in a cut through street myself. And it took me probably, it was about 8 cars before I could get out of the driveway this morning. So I am sensitive to that issue, but I know that the hospital can't really address these complaints so much because they don't have the control of the roads. But I do appreciate the fact that the hospital has done what it can and will have a management plan that will address those situations. I also appreciate the screening that they've agreed to put up to protect the backyards of those abutters. So thanks for that plan today. And as I said, in general, we need this emergency room. The hospital needs this space, and we need to provide this kind of asset to our community. So I appreciate the work that's gone into this and the thought that's gone into addressing the situation and trying to make emergency rooms as pleasant as they can be under the circumstances. I also think that it's a shame that the existing parking lot was apparently so poorly engineered that they couldn't do a second level to that. But I do appreciate the work that's gone in to address the stormwater drainage and the runoff from a pretty uncomplicated site. And so I think that and certainly improving that employee parking lot that was pretty terrible looking, and that certainly was a good idea. As I said, I think that the conditions that I've looked at, make sense. I could see, sort of going ahead to approve the plan with those mentions of those conditions and with the idea that we would get, all those corrections that have been asked for in these last few peer reports addressed on those plans.
Thank you, Kathleen. Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try not to repeat anything, but long story short is that I also would approve the application. I think that these are good, well thought out improvements to the property with minimal impact on the surrounding neighborhood. I am, like the other board members, extremely sympathetic about the traffic situation. I also live on a cut through street, and I also have been frustrated with dealing with the town in terms of getting these things addressed. I feel your pain, but it's not something the hospital has much control over, and it's really not something that's before this board. I don't think that this application really has too much impact on the traffic in the area. One other thing I'd like to point out is what struck me about this application and this entire process was how well coordinated it was on the applicant's part. And I credit a lot of that or all of it to Marion. I think, really good job by all you guys being proactive and responding to not only the neighbors' concerns, which are probably paramount, but also the peer reviewers and the town's concerns, the board's requests. Everything went very well. These applications tend to get unwieldy and last way too long. So nice job getting this done.
Thank you. Well, I agree with my fellow board members, and given the comments, I think at this time I'd like to the chair would entertain a motion to approve the application with the conditions as laid out in Attorney McKettrick's memorandum of, I believe it's September 11th is the date on that. So does a member of the board care to make a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'd move to strike that. So we're moving to vote on the application, or are we?
I think at this point in time, what is the pleasure of the board? We can do it in one of two ways. We can have one vote with the to approve the application with the special conditions, with the conditions noted in Attorney McKettrick's letter, or we can do two votes, one to approve the special permits and the relief request, and then follow that up with a second vote on relative to the conditions. So what's the pleasure of the board?
I mean, I've read through these conditions today, and I don't have any changes. I don't know if we're planning to discuss them as a board. If so, I would rather wait on approving the conditions until they're discussed. If we're not going to discuss them, then I would just move to vote for the entire for the four requests subject to the conditions.
Okay. I'm certainly amenable to discussing the conditions. I don't want to foreclose discussion in any way, shape, or form. Kathleen, do you have an opinion here?
I'd like to keep this moving along. So whatever you folks feel is the best and most expeditious way of, reaching. I'm sensitive to the fact that this application is filed for a while. We did have reasons that we had to delay our hearings because of, people being at sea and people being on vacation and all that sort of thing. So I would sort of like to see how far we can get to reach a conclusion.
I think I agree with Kathleen. What I would do is move that this board vote on the four requests on the applicant's application, and the result of that vote, if in favor of the application, would be subject to the three board members approving the final language of the decision, which would include the conditions. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That seems reasonable to me. So,
Okay, so moved.
Kathleen, do you wish to second that?
Yes, I would second that. Thank you.
The motion has been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by raising your hand and saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The board is unanimous in its vote, and so I want to congratulate the applicant on the relief noted. At this point in time, let's move into some practicalities here. First of all, Attorney McKettrick, I am going to dispense with the usual speech that one does in chair when mentioning congratulations on your relief. Oh, by the way, there's an appeals process and all this sort of stuff, but it is, as an experienced practitioner, I'm sure that you will instruct your client relative to that. And also that whatever actions that the applicant may undertake prior to the appeals process being exhausted are at their risk. So, can I assume that you will be instructing your client on those issues, Counselor?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So the other thing is in terms of heavy is the head that wears the crown. So, I'm can't say as I'm happy to take first crack at writing a decision, but I think it behooves me as chair to offer to take the first crack at writing a decision. Unless someone would like to come along and rescue me, Kathleen O'Donnell.
I have to apologize for being a little distracted because my other client, the Grafton Affordable Housing Trust, is in the middle of a fight tonight. And so I've been watching that and trying to stay out of it while I've been trying to do this. So, and they made the comment, my clients, that I had too many hats and I should learn to say no more frequently. But I'm willing to sort of help on this.
All right, so why don't we do this? Why don't I take first crack at it and circulate a draft amongst the board? Having said that, it will not be until the end of next week at the earliest before I can get to it, because I am, for the person that signs my paycheck, I'm running an offsite strategic planning session
Thanks.
for the better part of next week. So I have 3 days offsite out of the office, and I can guarantee you that I will not be able to get this. But having said that, I believe that the materials provided in the record are sufficiently extensive to give a good starting point to what needs to be done here. So I don't feel as if I would be drafting sua sponte. There's some original drafting that will need to be done, but not it's not going to be completely original. Having said that, I would very much appreciate input and edits from my fellow board members. So I will commit to getting that to the board as quickly as possible. Counselor, what's the timeline on the part of the applicant here? I know every applicant is ASAP, but
Well, I'd ask Richard Fernandez to give us some information about that. I know they're working very hard on, finalizing, working towards having their, construction contract and all the details that go into a project like this. This is a modular construction project. It has their permits that are in process. So Richard, could you give us a framework for what you're trying to do here in terms of time? I know you want to start. I mean, I know you.
We hope to start this project in 2020, so we're 4 years behind. But maybe, Janine, can you help me on that? I mean, Frank, Mr. Chair, we definitely want to get going, and we totally understand whatever we do now is at risk until the appeal period. But Janine, can you provide a little color? Janine is the expert on the next steps. It's actually what I was asking for on Monday is, where do we go from here if we get approval? So we're thankful and grateful for your thorough process and deliberation. I think we have a good plan, and I think the hospital is contributing to good information for the town and the traffic stuff that was brought up. But Janine, can you help us with timing?
Sure. Our next step would be to go and procure a construction manager. We anticipate that taking about a month, and we would do that concurrently with the appeals period, obviously with the condition that if an appeal comes up, we have to hold on an award. And then upon awarding a contractor, we would start looking toward getting all the tests done that need to be presented as part of the building permit application, including putting together the construction management plan, which is a condition that has been requested, the stormwater pollution prevention plan, the fire flow test, if the hospital does not already have one. And so that is all going to take us, if all goes swimmingly, it's all going to take us up until November. And then we are currently looking at the construction schedule to figure out from a seasonality standpoint what really makes sense. But the idea would be to get the building permit in hand as quickly as we can so that we have the option to move as many pieces forward as possible. As you know, this is a modular construction building, so we will be constructing this indoors in a different state. So the sooner we can get that process going as well is the best plan that we can come up with for the now.
Okay, thank you. So, I think it's always this board's intention to craft the best decision possible in the most timely fashion possible as well, but also recall that this is a volunteer board, and so this is a nights and weekends type of gig. So, but I know that my fellow board members are aware of the sensitivity of this, and that will be balanced with the need to make sure that this is a well-crafted, easily understood decision that will provide the appropriate guidance to the applicant, town officials, and indeed also be something that, in the unlikely event the neighbors needed, the abutters needed, that the abutters will also find it useful to have as well. So that's fine. I do not have anything else that I can think of at this particular point in time that may need to be discussed from a practicality point of view. Ms. O'Donnell, do you or Mr. Brown, do you have any additional comments or questions?
No, as I've said, other than, thanks to everybody, and particularly to Marion for hard work on putting all
Thank
those
you.
conditions together. That's going to be very helpful in the drafting. Appreciate that.
No comments.
Okay, with that, is there any objection from the members of the board to the chair adjourning this hearing?
No objection.
Well, yeah, no,
Go ahead.
no, Mr. Brown had something.
No, I just said no objection.
Neither do I.
Okay.
I wanted to just make one quick comment. When the board does complete its written decision and has a final decision, I would ask that you all sign it and not do it electronically. I'm not sure whether the Board of Appeals has filed the paperwork they need to in order to have electronic decisions, even though we've been filing them. I've been asked several times by the registry. I'm the only person left on earth who still files in person at the registry.
No, I was there just the
excuse
other
me.
day.
Okay. So they had a chance to talk to me about it, and they were questioning.
Yeah, no, we need to sign them, and we need to sign them with.
So if you
Rowan.
don't mind,
Yeah.
I'm willing to carry it around if you need me to, but I know that's way at the end, but I just wanted to mention it. And
Yeah.
also, so it's been very nice. It's very swift doing it electronically, but I think you need an actual signature when you get to that. And I appreciate all your effort to get this finished. And I just want to say something else. Thank you very much for all your kind comments about me. But the reason this has been a good process is because of an extremely capable and sophisticated set of consultants, and Richard Fernandez himself, whom I think is an excellent administrator. It isn't something that I can do on my own. So I really enjoyed working with everybody, and I appreciate all their very professional work. And that's the reason this went well. So thank you.
I would also add in by way of congratulations as well, I note that there are still 5 attendees, members of the public who are still with us. So I think that also bespeaks the level of engagement and participation from the members of the general public. So with that,
Great.
I want to thank everyone for your participation in this process. And at this point, I will now declare that this hearing is adjourned. Members of the board will now begin to prepare a written decision. So with that, thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, all of
Good
you.
night.
Good night.
Good night.